This week I had the pleasure to talk with Sam, a 23-year-old engineer from Texas. He quit his job working for Tesla to travel. I met him in Asunción in Paraguay, and we get to know each other and vibed immediately over playing chess. This talk is about money and how we could live in a deflationary world.
Well, let's get this started. So, could you give me a little bit about your background? People know me, but...
My background, okay.
Yes.
Let's see. I am from the U.S. I was born and raised in Texas. Tried my whole life to get out of Texas, and it didn't really work out until now. I went to university for mechanical engineering. Wasn't too big of a fan, but for some reason continued work in the field. Worked for a couple of years as an engineer. Switched over to tech startup for just about 6 months and quit in February, and now I'm unemployed.
Right. And we just met here in this hostel in Paraguay.
Yep.
And we talked earlier a little bit, and we came to the idea that we might just discuss how a deflationary world would look like. So maybe let's start there. I thought that an inflationary world, like we have it right now, every currency that we use is inflationary, which means that it loses a certain amount of purchasing power or exchange value to everything else in a certain amount of time. And in a deflationary world, each currency that you have would increase in purchasing power or in exchange value to everything else. So if you held money for long enough, you would be able to purchase more with the same amount that you had. Right now it's the other way around. Every money that you have in your bank account is worth less at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, the question is interesting because I think a lot of our current monetary system is based off this idea of infinite growth. And obviously you ideally have growth of some kind within a society, including, population and economic, scientific, technological growth. But I think that is also the very reason why the dollars themselves lose money. So in any case, what you describe as deflationary still involves an increase in the value of money. And to do that, you either need a higher value per unit of money or more units of money. So I think you can call it deflationary, but I think at its core, it still does the same thing as what you would call inflationary, if that makes sense. Or am I not thinking about that correctly?
So currently, let's start where it's currently at, then I can answer your idea. Currently, every state is printing more every year. In this deflationary world, the state would not do that. We have more and more productivity. So let's say a computer chip can do 10% more next year. So the older model will get cheaper. So over time, if we have the same amount of progress, things should just get cheaper if you don't do anything to the currency. If you just don't keep printing more and more, it would stay the same. And if we invent more, things get better, and we can do more with less amount of input, then this would mean that we can get more for less investment, for less money.
It makes sense with something like a computer chip getting more stronger year by year in that sort of example, but then how would you deal with scarcity? Because, as resources grow more scarce, they become more they require more resources to purchase. So if the value of your dollar only goes up without increasing in number of units, that also does not work if the scarcity of a good or service is increasing based off how much of it is left, I think.
Oh, so what you're saying is we have the same need for apples, and this will not go away. If we just stick to apples for now.
Sure.
So we look at apples, and apples, there's the same need for apples. And in your argument, the need will not go away, therefore it will not get cheaper. They will not get cheaper.
Not just the need. I'm thinking more of like a natural, let's say lithium, for example.
Mm-hmm.
We mine lithium. We know there's a finite amount of lithium that we have available to mine. In an ideal world, sure, we pay X dollars for lithium this year, and next year we pay X dollars for the same amount of lithium. But in practice, that's not possible. Maybe a more pressing thing might be like, let's say fresh water.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say in 50 years, fresh water becomes more scarce due to whatever reason. As nice as it would be for it to be the same price, like it will never work out that way. People will always have to raise or lower prices based off supply and demand. So the only way to be truly deflationary is to have an infinite supply of everything. Please, yeah. I think a better question is not like, sorry, I guess is your question, how do we achieve a deflationary world?
It's more like, how would it look like?
How would it look like?
If your money would buy more each year you hold it. Not like it's today, it buys less.
So the question is not how can we get there? It's more like, let's say we suddenly get there, what does it look like?
Yeah, how would it look like? Or is it even sustainable and attainable?
I think it's neither of those things. I think in a closed society, in like a controlled society, like let's say if you made a utopia of 100 people, and in this utopia you maybe had every possible resources you need, then it could work. But in practice, it would be impossible.
Why so?
It would be impossible unless every single person with money, power, and resources did a complete 180 and changed their way of doing things. But I think that in itself is impossible.
Could you elaborate that?
Yeah, so as humans, we of course all have the same basic desires. Like we all eat and sleep and shit and do all those things. So at a most basic level, that's really all we need to like live. Of course, we also want things like relationships and hobbies and pastimes and like other ways to find meaning. Maybe like religion or whatever might be of your choice. But beyond that, I guess you don't really need much more than that. But because of the greed that exists by people who have amassed the most amount of money and resources, I don't think that behavior will suddenly change overnight. And it seems to have only persisted and gotten worse throughout history. Historically, we've had revolutions whenever things get too bad, but I feel like now technology is at a point where a revolution of the same nature wouldn't be possible. Like maybe in the 1700s, you could go and guillotine the monarchy of France. I don't think you'd be able to do anything remotely similar today.
Probably not.
In an extreme sense. Like, not to say I would suggest anyone do such a thing. I'm just saying, like, if a revolution were to happen, it would not really be possible the same way it would have been in the past. And because of this, I don't think any significant change could happen without revolution, but I don't think revolution would be feasible. And because of that, I don't think a deflationary society, as you mentioned, could happen, at least within our lifetimes, or even like several generations.
Well, if we just forced it, if we would just bring,
Who's we?
let's say one government starts and decides that instead of printing more money, it will start destructing its currency. It will destruct 0.5% of the supply each year.
Mm-hmm.
And just an experiment, like to see how things shake out. And maybe I'll just paint a picture. And if a state started doing that, what would that make an individual do? Let's say a person who's selling bread, a baker. He needs to do investments, maybe new machines, needs to pay his workers. He will not just stop paying his workers because there's little less money around. He will still pay his workers, but he might just postpone the investment up to next year if it's not really necessary. So,
but then his workers would be angry.
Depends how badly needed it is. If it's badly needed, he will definitely do it. But if it's just we could increase productivity by 0.1%, then he would just turn it off for 1 year or two if it's not really that needed, and make the investment in the future because his money is worth more next year. It will probably decrease spending because more people will think, well, do I need a new car now? Do I really need a new that thing?
Right, but I think that's your problem. I think some amount of spending is required to keep money flowing through the economy. I think what you just described is very recessionary, because in recessions we see people not able to pay wages. In your case, you're saying that he's just not doing it as opposed to not being able to. But either way, there's a lack of wage being paid. Lack of wage leads to less amount of spending, and less spending leads to stagnation. So what happens if you own a kayak rental business, for example? Okay. No one needs to rent a kayak, but your business would suffer. And then what? You cannot feed your family if you have one. And then in this case, only the necessary businesses, only like essential businesses would be functional, which is not what you want, because then you lose scientific progress, you lose technological progress, and really only food and water and protection exist, which I think is not good.
Do you think people would not go to the movies or do something for fun in that world? Because I think people still would. They would just be they would probably do a little less. So the industries would need to scale down accordingly.
Right.
But it wouldn't mean that there's none of that.
Right, I agree. In the same way, like in 2008, it's not like people stopped doing anything fun at all. You know, people still went to concerts and movies and stuff. But there was still significant strain, loss of jobs, and overall economic suffering. I think the idea of what you say is too idealistic. In theory, it could be very nice, but there's no way in practice that it would be successful, just due to human nature. As much as I'd want it to be successful, personally, I think everything we see historically in humans leading up to this point would suggest that this would just not be sustainable generationally. Maybe for like one or half a generation it could work, but beyond that I don't think so. However, what you are describing, and I hate to say this, I really do, but the whole idea of like Bitcoin, for example, is similar to what you're saying, where you don't have an infinite supply that you keep printing out. You have a finite amount, and that finite amount is lessened every year as blocks are mined in this example, and the value of it goes up in theory. which is interesting to think about in the context of this discussion, because you are holding on to something with the hopes that it becomes more valuable, but at the same time, you're not spending it. Like, you're not buying it to spend on goods, you're buying it to have it so that you can convert it to something else that you can spend on goods.
Yeah. Let's keep that in mind. I would like to go back to the spending idea one more time. We can definitely discuss that, because I think Bitcoin is a deflationary currency. And it is like there's no state that is behind it, and not states have amounts of it, but it's not really controlled by one. And in my head, it's just a state that's trying this out.
Oh, it's decentralized.
Yeah. What was my point? Forgot it.
I would argue that the nature of it being deflationary is relative, because we're only comparing it against inflationary currencies. But in an ideal world, that wouldn't even exist to compare it to.
Yes. But we are not there yet. Anyhow, let's imagine that this world is there for 10 years. And everyone knows that your money is worth more next year. Like, that's the assumption that every process has accustomed. There has been a huge shock, and businesses have failed. Potentially people have died over it. But now it's like this, and everyone has accepted that that's the new rules. Like, the inflationary system was also introduced step by step at some point, and now we just accepted that it is the way it is. How do you think this world would look like?
I think people would lose their minds. If you suddenly made all currency binary, so you agreed to stop.
No, just stay in US dollars. Just stay in your own country.
Sure. So the US decides to stop printing physical currency.
It has stopped long ago, and now everyone knows that the stuff you get paid, you can save it, and you know that next year it's be a little bit more that you can buy with it. That's the world we live in now.
Would things would still have to depreciate in this world, though, right? Like, you buy a car today, it's not suddenly worth more next year. It's worth less because there's been wear on it.
Yes, there's tear and wear on everything. It's not like it's a magic world, but
right.
Your money is more because there's not new printed and stuffs get lost. So, or even money is burned at a certain rate. Up to a certain point, but just imagine nothing new is printed.
So you're saying if you then put your money in the stock market, it would be a double compounding, because it would compound in the sense that the value of whatever you're investing in goes up, and the value of the money itself also goes up?
You could think of it this way, but in this world there wouldn't be no need for a need to invest in the stock market. Right now, I think most people, like you and I, just invest to not lose money, or maybe make a little bit more. If I had the option to just completely save it and know that nothing is eroding, I would go for the nothing eroding method.
Right.
Sure, if you find a good business, then it will go up in value, and the equivalent amount in US dollars would also go up in purchasing power.
Right, so that this is maybe true of average people, but the people that have the most money in and out of the stock market, so people with like a shit ton of money, would not react in this way. And while we can sit here and talk all day about how people without a shit ton of money would respond and react, you cannot ignore the actual flow of the money. Like, the people with the mindset of wanting to get as rich as possible, which is quite a lot of people that are up there, like top 1%, let's say, they won't magically stop trying to make more money just because the value of their dollars are going up every year, and they know that. They're still going to try to, make the most. And the price of stocks will still be based off of earnings reports and goodwill of the company and like whatever factors they already exist on.
There would be less need to throw money at those companies, at those shares, at least for now.
Yeah, right now, actually, I'm getting caught up on this idea of like, why is there truly no other reason we invest? Like, part of me wants to think like, oh, people invest because they believe in a company and they believe in what a company will do, but that's just not the case. Like, it's just simply to make more money, which is like, yeah, fuck. Okay. Okay. I feel like also in a deflationary society, less growth and creation would happen, less entrepreneurial endeavors, because there'd be no need to. However, on the flip side, more people would spend time with their families. I can't think of any other positives.
I would argue that there's less shitty products in the world, less low quality products, because you actively, when you need something, you know that you could get it for a little bit cheaper next year. So why not go for a higher quality product? Or people would also, I think, start making better products again. I'm not sure if it's the same for the US, but in Germany, have you seen the build quality of stuff that's made like 100 years back?
Yeah,
a little bit older.
Yeah.
I would like to go back to this, but right now there is no need, because I can just buy 10 IKEA cupboards and it will last me a lifetime rather than one nice one.
I think by this logic, though, if I knew that my dollars would be worth more next year, why would I not just buy shitty products this year so that I can have more money whenever all of my existing wealth increases in value for next year?
What do you mean?
So you're saying that there'd be less shitty products in this world, and I would disagree. Because if I'm trying to maximize the amount of value of wealth or whatever that I have, I would think, oh, well, why would I spend more right now on a nice item when I can buy a shitty one that's going to last only a year, but by this time next year, the difference is going to be worth more, and I can just keep buying shitty products as my money increases. Because why would I spend $100 today on something when I could spend $10 and that $90 will be worth $100 next year anyways? And then I
see a point.
Now
think on that.
Because I think like it's important to not be idealistic, because in an ideal world, no one's greedy, no one commits crimes, everyone cares about their neighbor, and everyone does everything that they can to put good back into society, and that's obviously impossible. And then that unfortunately leads down the other end of like, because that is impossible, we can never bring about change that will truly benefit everyone, the common people, because the people with the money and the resources would never allow such legislation to be enacted, because almost entirely due to greed. And
yeah, I agree. I think the point to why I think you would buy something very valuable instead of like 10 shitty ones is that if you knew that it would last a lifetime, and maybe even two, that you could inherit something, pass it down to your offspring, I think more people would go for that rather than a shitty thing. And then that thing over time would be, its value is worth?
I don't know. Let's take a car, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I buy a nice car now?
A car is very specific because it loses value.
Yeah, but I would argue that most things do, unless you're buying like jewelry, maybe maybe art. Well, that's a whole can of worms because then
Okay.
Maybe like a toolbox. Let's say you have tools that are really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I spend a bunch of money on really nice tools now to maybe pass on to my kids when I could buy shitty tools, and then right when I'm about to die, when my money is worth more than it will ever be worth at any other point in my life? Why would I not wait until then to buy the nice toys or tools for my kids? Like, I think it's too idealistic to think that people suddenly stop buying shitty goods because their money is just worth more suddenly. I think there will definitely be people who do that, but I think
no, I see the point.
Yeah.
I think you're right. As much as it hurts me, but I think you're right.
I wish I wasn't right. I wish I wasn't. I wish people could collectively understand what's better for the population, but I don't think that will ever happen. And I've at least not seen or read any historical evidence to suggest that this will happen, at least within 100 years.
Yeah. Well, let's turn to the thing that you mentioned earlier, Bitcoin in the room. It's there. It's deflationary by itself, or not inflationary, so it's like stable. How will this unfold? I could see two scenarios. One is it's just slowly gathering more and more wealth, more and more purchasing power. Or I could see it failing, but the failing thing is not really... I don't think it's the less probable version that I see in the future.
I think something important to keep in mind here is the availability of resources. There, at least at this time, and again, I'd love to be wrong, but there's strong evidence to suggest that 50 to 100 years from now, there will be a significant strain on resources like food and water for the global population. So you can't have this discussion without discussing like what your money's, if there's no food or water to buy, your money's useless. And there's like no reason to even have a discussion about money at all whenever you can't survive, like when the something like how Pablo Escobar burned his money to keep his daughter warm, like when the value of your basic human need outweighs whatever the monetary value is. So you have to discuss with that in mind too. And in theory, like if Bitcoin was invented in 1980, I don't know. Oh no, that doesn't really make sense. When you say Bitcoin fails, you mean like the value goes to zero?
Yeah. Something happens, everyone loses trust in it, and no one wants it anymore because there's a bug, or everyone's like, nah, that's worthless, because no one believes in it anymore. I don't see that case happening.
I agree, but Bitcoin is no different than regular money in the way that it's like completely invented. Yeah. Like we only feel money to be worth something because we have assigned that value to it.
Yeah, because someone else is willing to exchange something else for it. It's the only reason money is there.
Right. And it sucks because like you need that in a society, but it also is poisonous because people will like, do whatever it takes to get it.
I think the main idea is not really that faulty, because if I have something very niche and I want something else niche, if we didn't have money, then I would go a long time looking for someone who is willing to exchange that. Money is just because at the end of the day, you want like food or water, or electricity or whatever. Yeah.
But you need something to like in the middle to then convert to everything else.
So, yeah.
Which is why I don't think you can be truly deflationary.
Maybe not deflationary, but I would like to have a world where I knew that stuff that I stored away is not losing value. So I think by now I might agree to the idea that if it was truly deflationary, that the government was burning money every year just to keep up that fact that we need less money, then this would lead to a lot of consequences which might not be beneficial for us as a society. But this middle ground that Bitcoin struck, where it's not going either direction, I think that should be the goal we're aiming for with every currency. Because why would you need someone put out more of that? I mean, I could be wrong on those numbers, but I believe there's a couple billion of euros that are floating around. Why do we need more? Isn't that enough to have it in any place that we need it to exchange for what we want?
In theory, yes, but I think in order for that to change, you see too many examples of people who are hoarding wealth when that wealth should be ideally redistributed into like public institutions. Mm-hmm. But I think, so like it again goes back to an idealistic thing where ideally you would have a system that allows for growth and creation and innovation perpetually, without it falling into the hands of people that are just not really using it to do anything except enrich their own power. But because that in itself cannot change unless those people with the resources make those changes, like we can never achieve this. Even though it would be nice, it would be great. But I don't know. I'd love to be wrong. I really, it would be really nice if I were wrong about all this and suddenly everything changed and there's more benefit for the common man, but I, again, don't think that that's possible.
Right. So, unfortunately, no deflationary world for us.
I think so, yeah. Oh.
Well, let's see where it's going then.
Yeah.
Dan, thank you for your time.
Yeah, of course. This is interesting. I'm glad to have been able to talk about this.